Hi, I'm Rowan. My father threw my grandma into the snow and called her a thief for an heirloom she gave me. He didn't care that she was 80 or that she was crying. My mother? She looked away. Like love had an expiration date. When I found her, shivering like some forgotten stray, I couldn't breathe. But the worst part wasn't what they did that night. It was what they planned to take next. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's hearing this, because maybe someone else out there's been told to throw dignity away, and maybe you didn't. I was finishing my second coffee of the evening, the kind that stains your teeth and burns your gut, when I realized I hadn't called Grandma Delilah in almost a week. I'd meant to phone her the night before, but work ran long again. Logistics isn't a glamorous job, but it keeps the lights on. And in winter, especially up north, that's something. My apartment in Pittsburgh hummed with that familiar blend of stale radiator heat and too much quiet. I leaned back in my chair, phone in hand, thumb hovering over her name. I could already hear her answering, cheerful and firm. "Rowan, don't you work too hard now, honey." She raised me when Mom shut down, not physically left, just gone inside herself. After Dad came back from his business trips angrier than he left, she started fading. Grandma stepped in, firm hands and warm casseroles, the only one who looked me in the eye like I mattered. Even now I thought of her house as home, even though she shared it with the very people who had made mine unbearable. I was about to hit dial when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I hadn't saved, but immediately recognized. Mrs. Halvers, our old neighbor from Albany. I answered, a little surprised. "Mrs. Halvers?" Her voice was trembling. "Rowan, I didn't know who else to call." She was lying there, outside, in just a nightgown. My spine went stiff. Wait, what? Who? "Delilah, your grandma. She was in the snow, Rowan. She fell. She's okay now. I mean, she's at my place, but you need to come." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed a duffel, threw in whatever clothes were clean, and was in my car in under 10 minutes. No sleep, no pause, just the road and a gnawing hole in my gut. The snow thickened as I left Pennsylvania, swallowing the highway lines and hissing under my tires. My hands clenched the wheel so tightly they ached. I played her voice in my mind the whole ride, trying to imagine what could have happened. Grandma Delilah wasn't careless, and even on her worst day, she wouldn't walk out in the snow wearing nothing but a nightgown. I rolled into the neighborhood around 6:20 in the morning. The sun hadn't come up yet, but the sky was starting to bruise pale blue. Snow blanketed every roof, every tree branch, every mailbox. My breath fogged as I stepped out, heart pounding. She was sitting on the porch swing of the Halvers house, wrapped in an oversized coat that clearly wasn't hers. Her posture was straight, proud even, but her hands trembled. Her fingers were discolored, a sick shade of purple near the tips. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. I walked up slowly, crouched in front of her. "Grandma," I said softly, "what the hell happened?" She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just looked at me, tired in a way I had never seen before. "Wendell thinks I stole something." I blinked. "Dad?" She nodded once. "That scarf, the one his mother left behind. He claims there was money inside it, $89,000, he says. And he thinks I took it." I stared at her, speechless. She looked away, voice flat. "He screamed at me in front of Annette and the girls. Said I'd been planning it. Said I'd waited till she died to rob the family. And then he opened the door and told me to get out." "In the middle of the night?" My voice cracked. "I was in bed," she said, like recounting a weather report. "Wearing my nightgown. He didn't care. Just told me to go." "And Mom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She stood by the stairs, she said quietly. Didn't say a word. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. From the cold or the rage, I couldn't tell. I helped her up gently and walked her inside the Halvers' living room. They had an old gas fireplace going and a blanket ready for her. I nodded my thanks to Mrs. Halvers, who gave me a look that said more than words ever could. We sat down, and I got her a mug of warm water. She sipped slowly. I didn't press, not right away, but I needed to understand. I needed the full picture. Why now? I asked. Why would he do this? She let out a hollow laugh. He always hated that your grandfather left the house to me. He wanted it, said it was rightfully his since he was the oldest. When his mother passed, she left me that scarf, just an old thing wrapped in tissue. I didn't even know there was money in it, if there was. Did you look? I didn't have to, she said. I gave it to your cousin Lydia a month ago. She's getting married next spring, and it was her great-grandma's. I thought she'd appreciate it. I ran my hand over my face, breathing in deep, trying not to scream. That house, the one I grew up in, the one that smelled like oatmeal and pine cleaner, it had turned into a battlefield overnight. I stepped outside, walking slowly toward it, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The front porch looked the same wicker chairs, same wreath on the door, but everything about it felt foreign, cold, hostile. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the door. I remembered being 6 years old, crying from a scraped knee, and Delilah opening that same door with her arms outstretched. Now I saw the same frame and felt nothing but fury. I turned back, jaw tight, chest heavy. I'm going back tomorrow, I told myself. They thought she'd just disappear quietly. They forgot she had me. The morning came gray and heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I hadn't slept, not really, just drifted in and out on the guest pull-out couch at Mrs. Halvers' place, every creak in the old house jerking me back awake. I kept thinking of Delilah's hands, those stiff, purplish fingers she tried to hide in her coat sleeves, and the look in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even angry. Just hollow. That quiet kind of hurt people don't recover from. I stood outside the house just after 8 a.m., boots crunching over snow that hadn't melted. A shallow smear of brown-streaked ice still clung to the edge of the porch, where she must have fallen when Wendell shoved her out. I stared at it too long. The door looked the same, of course, same weather-beaten green paint, same brass handle that used to stick in the winter, but the house felt foreign now, like it had molted into something uglier while I was gone. I knocked twice, firm, not polite. Footsteps inside. And the door swung open, and Wendell filled the frame. He didn't say anything, just looked at me like I'd shown up a week early to a dinner party no one invited me to. His hair was still damp from the shower. He wore a flannel shirt I remembered from years ago, same one he always pulled out when he wanted to seem casual for church barbecues. But his eyes were sharp. "You didn't call," he said, voice flat. "No," I replied. "I didn't think you deserved the courtesy." He stepped aside without a word. The house smelled like wood polish and bacon, like everything was normal. I walked in and immediately noticed something off. The old blue recliner Delilah always used, gone. A new leather chair sat in its place, like she'd never existed in that corner. I turned to him. "Where's the scarf?" He didn't flinch. "Don't play dumb, Rowan. You know what she did." I stared. "I know she didn't steal anything." "She lied to all of us for years," he snapped. "Manipulated us. Always making herself the victim so you'd pity her." My jaw tightened. "That scarf wasn't yours to begin with. You wouldn't even know its worth if Delilah hadn't taken care of it all these years." Wendell crossed his arms. "Exactly. She kept it. Like she owned it." The man truly believed it. Or maybe he'd convinced himself so completely there was no room left for doubt. That's what scared me. Not just the accusation, but how at peace he looked saying it. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Annette, in her housecoat and slippers, holding 2 mugs. "Tea?" she offered gently, like I'd just stopped by for a chat. I didn't take it. She set both mugs down on the counter, then reached into a nearby box. "We were going through some of her things. Figured maybe it's time you had these." Inside the cardboard were Delilah's brooch, the one she wore every Thanksgiving, a pair of thin cashmere gloves I'd bought her for Christmas last year, and her teacup set, the delicate blue porcelain ones she only used when we'd sit and talk about nothing. "She's not dead," I said, voice cracking. Annette didn't look up. "No, but she's not coming back either." I stared at my mother, the same woman who used to tie my shoes in silence, who never said much when Wendell raised his voice at the dinner table, but who always nodded afterward like she agreed. "She took care of me when you couldn't," I said, more to myself than to her. Annette finally looked me in the eye. "And now she's tired, confused. Maybe it's time she rests." They'd written her off, not even out of cruelty, but convenience. Like it was easier to believe she'd lost her mind than admit they'd lost theirs. I picked up the brooch, ran my thumb along the edges, then put it back in the box. I didn't want it. "I'm seeing Pastor Gary," I said on my way out. Neither of them stopped me. The parsonage was just 4 blocks down. He was out front, clearing his walkway with one of those oversized push brooms. When he saw me, he straightened, brushing snow off his sleeves. "Rowan, I heard you came into town," he said, soft as always. "Did you see what happened?" He hesitated. "Pastor," I said, "did you see it?" He sighed, shoulders slumping. "I looked out the window, thought it was a trick of the light at first. Then I saw Delilah." "And?" He rubbed his hands together, though it wasn't that cold. "Rowan, I figured it was a private matter. I didn't want to interfere. She was barefoot in the snow. I know. You prayed with her every week. She trusted you." He swallowed, nodded slowly. "I prayed for her that night, too. Did you think about calling the police?" He winced. "I didn't feel it was my place." I felt a wave of something. I'm not sure what it was. Not rage, not sadness. Just a quiet sort of clarity, the kind that hits when you realize you're more alone in the world than you thought. When even the people who should speak up choose silence instead. He offered to pray with me. I let him, because in that moment, I didn't know what else to do. But when I left, the air felt different, colder, but also clearer, like fog lifting off a field after a long night. Back at Mrs. Halver's, I sat in my car for a while, staring at the dashboard. I thought about the scarf, about the way Wendell had said that woman, like Delilah, hadn't been part of his family for over 4 decades, about how Annette handed me that box like she was passing down junk from a garage sale, about Pastor Gary, who'd watched it happen and did nothing. They hadn't just reacted, they had planned, they had waited for a reason, a pretext, to erase her. And the moment they found it, they acted. Fast, decisive, like it had all been rehearsed. And now? The house that smelled like bacon? It had already moved on, but I hadn't. "They erased her like she was disposable," I whispered to the empty car. "I'm not done." I gripped the steering wheel. It was smooth and cold under my fingers. My breath fogged up the windshield. If they wanted her gone for good, they should have made sure I was gone too. But I wasn't. I was still here. And I was wide awake now. After leaving Pastor Gary's, I didn't drive straight back to the house. I pulled into the empty lot behind the diner where I used to sit with Delilah on slow Sunday afternoons. We'd eat pie and talk about everything and nothing. I let the engine idle while the sky shifted from dull gray to something darker, more private. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. Rage doesn't shiver. It simmers. I took a breath and let the memory come. I must have been 7 or 8. Delilah had taken me to the attic, just the 2 of us. I thought we were hiding from Annette because of some silly prank I pulled. but Delilah had a serious look in her eyes. She knelt down beside me and held up this small gold locket, oval-shaped, worn smooth at the edges like it had lived 100 lives. She opened it and showed me the tiny key tucked inside, barely bigger than a paperclip. "This isn't just jewelry," she said, brushing the hair from my forehead. "It's protection. You keep this safe, no matter what. There are things people can take from you, but not if you know where to hide them first." "Why would someone want to take your things?" I had asked, confused. She smiled, that tight-lipped way she did when something was too painful to explain to a child. "Because sometimes people you love change, and when they do, you have to remember who you are." That locket stayed around her neck every day after that. Church, grocery store, even gardening in her Sunday slacks. It was her talisman. And now it was gone. I shifted the truck into drive and headed toward the bank, the one she always used, the old brick building with green awnings and frost-rimmed windows. It sat like a relic, barely modernized inside. The teller recognized me right away. Linda, I think. We went to school together. She used to braid my hair in 4th grade. Now she looked nervous just seeing me. "Hi, Rowan," she said, forcing a smile. "What can I help you with?" "I need to ask about Delilah Marin's safety deposit box. I know she kept one here for years." She hesitated, glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Rowan, I'm not supposed to—" "She raised me," I interrupted, my tone firmer than I meant. "Please." Linda bit her lip and tapped the keyboard slowly, like stalling for time. Finally, she looked up. "It was accessed last Tuesday." I blinked. "What?" "Someone came in with a power of attorney. They emptied it." The walls felt like they tilted. "Who?" I whispered. She hesitated. "It was your father. Wendell." I couldn't speak for a second. My hands clenched against the counter, and she noticed. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "We had to honor the paperwork." "Can I see the documents?" I asked. She checked with the branch manager. A few minutes later, I was in a side office, staring at black and white copies of legalese and half-legible signatures. There it was, power of attorney granted to Wendell Marin, dated 2 months ago. And below that, Delilah's signature, except it wasn't. Not really. It looked like hers, sure, but it was too clean, too smooth. Delilah had a tremor in her hand the last year. She'd even joked about her soup squiggles. This signature didn't tremble. It glided. I stared at it like it was a betrayal written in ink. "She never would have signed this," I muttered. Linda remained quiet. Her face said everything she couldn't. I left the bank without another word. Driving back, I didn't turn on the radio. I needed silence to think, the kind that sharpens memory like a whetstone. If Delilah hadn't signed that, then who had? And more importantly, what had they taken from that box? When I reached the house, the porch light was already off. I didn't knock this time. I used the spare key Delilah always kept under the frog planter, even though I was sure Wendell and Annette had changed the locks. They hadn't. The house felt colder than before. Maybe because now I knew what kind of rot lived in its walls. Delilah's bedroom was down the hall on the right. They'd gutted it. The scent of her lavender sachets was gone, the curtains replaced. Even the rug with the wine stain from Christmas '03 was gone. Her nightstand, the one with the false drawer where she used to tuck personal notes, was missing. So was her locked jewelry box. It was like she never existed here. I opened the closet. Just a few winter coats and some holiday boxes, plastic tubs labeled XMAS, and linens. I moved one aside and something caught my eye near the back corner, wedged between a slat and the wall. A chain, gold, snapped. I pulled it out slowly. It was hers. The locket was gone, but the broken chain was unmistakable. I sat back on my heels, staring at it. Someone had taken it off her, forcefully. And if that's how they got the key... My stomach twisted. I stepped out into the hallway, holding the chain tight in my hand. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. Evidence? Answers? Some scrap of decency left behind? Back in the kitchen, the answering machine blinked with a new message. I pressed play. It was Annette's voice. Calm. Too calm. Rowan, I hope you've had time to think. Delilah's gone now and we're trying to move forward. I boxed up some of her scarves and that ugly clock she liked. You can come get them if you want. But let this go. We all have to. I didn't even realize I was laughing until it turned to a sound closer to grief. Let it go. They wanted me to pretend she never mattered, that she didn't keep this family from falling apart for decades, that she didn't raise me when they wouldn't, that she didn't love us despite everything. But now I saw the pattern. This wasn't grief, it was cleanup. They didn't just exile her. They looted her. Everything carefully erased, except the trail they didn't think I'd follow. I walked out of the house, back into the night. The snow was beginning to crust with ice, the world hardening over again. I stared down at the chain in my hand. If that box is empty, then the heirloom wasn't stolen last week. It was stolen long before the snow. The courthouse was unusually quiet for a Thursday morning. I parked my truck just past the loading dock and took the side entrance, avoiding the lobby where the county clerks knew my father by name. No need to spark chatter if I could help it. I signed my name in the visitor book with a borrowed pen that barely worked, the kind of cheap plastic stick that always ran dry mid-stroke. A woman at the records window barely looked up when I asked for the estate documents filed under Delilah Marin's name. Power of attorney and any recent filings with property updates, I said. She thumbed through a few folders and brought me one that felt too light in my hands. I thanked her, stepped back into one of the small viewing booths, and shut the door. The folder opened to a 3-page set stapled neatly, almost too neatly. The first was the power of attorney form. I scanned to the bottom, and there it was. Her name, or something pretending to be it. The signature read Delilah Marin, slanted and graceful. Just like the checks she used to sign at the grocery store, back when I was little. But that wasn't how she wrote anymore, not for at least the past year. Not since her hands had started trembling so bad she couldn't even hold her favorite mug. 2 months ago, the document said, 2 months before the snow, before everything fell apart. I felt a slow, cold knot forming in my stomach. I flipped the page to the estate update, the heirloom transfer. The same signature, same date. I leaned forward, staring at the curves in the D, the elegant loop in the M. Perfectly executed. Too perfect. Delilah hadn't been able to write her own name on a birthday card in 6 months. I'd seen her struggle with a pencil just to jot down her grocery list, and yet this flowed like a script off Broadway. I shut the folder and leaned back. Someone forged it. The thought didn't rush over me like a wave. It fell in pieces. First, the doubt, then the anger, then the disbelief that somehow they'd expected this to hold up. I stood, pressing the folder closed, and thanked the clerk before heading out. But I didn't leave immediately. I stopped outside the courthouse steps, opened my phone, and stared down at it like it owed me a confession. My thumb hovered. Then I turned away from the busy street and walked to the truck. I sat for a while with the folder still on the seat beside me, untouched, like it might bite. And as I waited for the courage to dig deeper, my mind took me back to a memory so vivid, it might as well have been projected on the windshield. It was late fall, the kind where the leaves have all dropped, but the frost hasn't claimed the windows yet. I was home for dinner. Delilah had made tea and biscuits, and the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and lavender. She reached for her cup, fingers wobbling like reeds in the wind. Her hand jerked at the last second. The teacup hit the table edge and shattered, scattering porcelain like rice across the floor. "Oh, honey," I'd said, jumping up to help. She waved me off, her lip trembling. "It's happening more. The tremors. I can't even write in my journal anymore. You know that?" Her voice had cracked at that last bit. I hadn't known what to say. Now, sitting in the truck, I looked down at that flawless signature in the folder again. They expected no one to remember. But I did. I opened the second document again. This one had witness lines, 2 names scribbled. I squinted at the second. Stanley Goodwin. That name didn't belong in Delilah's world. It belonged in Wendell's Thursday night poker games, back when he used to come home smelling like cigar smoke and cheap whiskey. I searched the name in the county system. There it was. Stanley Goodwin, booked for DUI. The same exact date the documents were signed. Held overnight. No release until the following morning. So how had he signed a document in Delilah's living room at 3:45 p.m.? They hadn't even tried to make it believable. I felt my jaw clench tight. Everything started fitting together like jagged shards of a bottle. They didn't just take advantage, they orchestrated it. Wendell, probably Annette, too, and someone who could mimic Delilah's handwriting. I leaned back in the driver's seat and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a family mistake. This was theft in slow motion, hidden behind teacups, trembling hands, and kind smiles that meant nothing. The sun was starting to sink when I finally drove back home. The light was soft and gold, slanting across the trees as I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Inside the house, I hung my coat and went straight to my desk. I spread the documents out in front of me like I was preparing for a war. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I didn't recognize the number right away, but I knew the tone before I hit play. "Hi, sweetheart." Annette's voice came through, syrupy and cautious. "Your he's not doing great. I know you're upset, and you have every right, but maybe don't dig too deep, honey. Some things are better off forgotten." I sat there, listening to her voice coat itself in guilt and sugar like a caramel gone too bitter. Not doing great. That man had torn through every boundary Delilah ever built, and she wanted me to feel sorry now. I deleted the message. No second listens, no response. I looked at the stack of papers one more time and said quietly to no one, "You can't rewrite the past, Annette. But I can make sure the truth burns through your future." I didn't sleep much. Just stared at the ceiling. The edges of the courthouse files still burned into my brain like branding irons. The signature that wasn't hers. The witness who couldn't have been there. The quiet certainty that Wendell had lied with full intention. By 8 a.m., I was back at the cabin, my coat still zipped, fingers numb, not from the cold, but from a strange mix of clarity and grief. I dropped the manila folder on the kitchen table and stood over it for a while. Then I opened the cabinet above the coffee maker and stared at the line of dusty books along the top shelf. Delilah never liked safes, said they made things feel secretive in all the wrong ways. She used books, big ones, heavy ones, and she never shelved them in order. As a kid, I once found my birthday money pressed inside an encyclopedia between entries for locust and lungfish. I stepped up on a chair, pulling volumes down one by one, flipping through chapters. Nothing. A few notes in margins, some receipts. But then I reached for the family Bible, the thick leather-bound one she kept by the fireplace, the one that hadn't moved in over a year. It fell open in my hands, too easily. Somewhere near Psalm 27, a small yellow envelope peeked from the pages. I didn't move at first, just stood there, staring at the fragile fold like it might vanish if I blinked. Finally, I pulled it free. It was addressed to no one. Just old, lined paper, tucked neatly inside. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Delilah's loops and curves, shaky in places, but deliberate. My eyes scanned the first lines, and I felt my knees give a little. I slid down to sit on the floor. "If you're reading this, Rowan, then it means you've started looking. I always hoped you would. You were always the only one who asked real questions." I kept reading. Wendell's charm is loud. Mine was always quieter. Too quiet, it turns out. He laughs about selling things, about deals behind my back. I told him once the heirloom wasn't just an antique, it was a piece of my mother. He called it dead weight, said if I didn't let it go, someone else would. She had dated the note. It was 3 months before her collapse. In one line, she mentioned calling a lawyer, but said she didn't trust anyone local. Too many small-town favors, she'd written. Then came the line that hollowed me out. The house is yours. I wanted to tell you in person, but I feared Wendell would twist it. He always did. So I tucked this here, where I prayed it would last. I held the envelope to my chest for a second. The floor felt cold, but my throat burned. Delilah had known. She'd seen it all coming. I folded the pages carefully and placed them on the table next to the forged documents. For a moment, I just stared at the contrast, her delicate script beside Wendell's bold lies. A memory bubbled up without warning. I don't know what brought it on. Maybe the smell of the old pages or the weight of the house around me. But suddenly I was 16 again, standing in the backyard, watching smoke rise from the fire pit. Delilah had sat beside me, wrapped in her thick red sweater, her hands curled around a cup of tea. It's not just a house, she'd said. This was my restart. Every woman deserves one. I remember frowning. What do you mean, restart? She'd smiled at me, tired, quiet. One day, you'll know. When the world breaks you wide open, you'll understand why some things can't be shared, only passed. At the time, I thought she meant healing. Now I realized she meant escape. The fire pit crackled behind my eyes as the memory faded. I looked at the clock. It was barely noon. I needed to know more. By 1:15, I was parked outside the small public library in town. I hadn't been inside in years. The old building still smelled like dust and carpet glue. The librarian, a woman named June, who used to babysit me once or twice, barely looked up when I walked in. I spent the next hour flipping through property records, trying to match the language Delilah used in her note with any updated deed filings. Nothing official had been recorded in the past year, which only confirmed what I suspected. Whatever she'd done, she hadn't trusted the system to protect it. As I was leaving, June called after me. You still poking around that house your mama left? She asked gently. Just tying up some loose ends, I said. She gave a soft laugh. She always did like things tidy. Except men. I gave a small nod and left without a word. By evening, I was back at the cabin. I placed Delilah's pages inside a protective folder, tucked them in the kitchen drawer, then sat at the counter with a pen and notepad. I started sketching out what I knew. The date of the supposed signature. The state Delilah had been in. Stanley Goodwin's DUI record. The note in the Bible. Each line added weight. I needed to hear Wendell's voice again, not because I missed it, but because I needed to understand how he justified any of this. I opened my phone. One missed call from earlier. One voicemail. His voice calm and measured. Rowan, I hear you've been asking around. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. Don't embarrass the family. We can still talk this out, man to man. I stared at the phone, man to man. That's what he'd said the day he pushed Delilah into the snow and slammed the door behind her. You want to act like a man, then be one, he'd said to me back then. I deleted the voicemail. Then I walked out to the back porch. The night was still, moonlight brushing the treetops. I lit a small fire in the pit, just like Delilah used to do when her thoughts got too loud. She hadn't just left me memories, she'd left me a map, and Wendell never knew I could read it. The sky was just starting to lighten when I slipped my hand around the Bible again. I sat at the edge of the couch, both documents resting on the coffee table. Delilah's handwritten deed, and the polished, notarized forgery Wendell had filed. The contrast was like night and day. One carried smudges from years of quiet hope. The other gleamed with arrogance. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. After reading every word of her journal pages, how she feared Wendell would erase everything she built, I knew I couldn't let this sit another day. I made coffee out of habit, not need. I needed movement. Forward. Delilah always said, "When you've got the truth in your hand, don't waste time waiting for permission." So I didn't. I still had Tyrell Franklin's card in the kitchen drawer. We'd only met once, at a block party 3 summers ago. He was the quiet type, grilled a decent burger, and listened more than he talked. A rarity in law. Back then, I never imagined I'd be calling him before sunrise with a box of Family Betrayal under my arm. I left him a message at 6:12 a.m. "Hi, it's Rowan Marsh. We met at the Dunleavy barbecue. I'm calling about a property issue. It's urgent and it involves forgery. I've got physical proof. If you can do a video call first thing this morning, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you." 10 minutes later, his assistant replied by text. "Mr. Franklin can Zoom at 8 a.m. sharp. Here's the link." By 7:58, I was seated in front of my laptop, the pages spread out like a battlefield. Delilah's script, Wendell's bold fake, photos of her journal entries, and the notarized date from 2 years ago that didn't match any of her real paperwork. Tyrell's face appeared right on time. "Rowan, didn't expect to hear from you, but I remember you. You said this was urgent?" I nodded, holding up the papers. "This is Delilah's real deed to the house, dated, written in her hand, and signed. She gave it to me, but this," I held up the other sheet, "is what Wendell filed with the county. Same house, different language, different beneficiary." His brow furrowed. "Is that signature notarized?" "Yes, but here's the thing. It was notarized before she died. But the contents changed after that. You can see it. The phrasing, the structure, it's all different. And here," I leaned into the camera and held up a scanned page from her journal. "She wrote this 3 weeks before she passed. He's circling, trying to reshape everything. But I've left what matters where only Rowan would look." Tyrell leaned back. His eyes scanned quickly, then narrowed. "If you're right, and that notary was attached to a version of the deed that Wendell later altered, that's felony fraud. And if she wrote you in directly—" "She did," I cut in. "She didn't trust safes. She left it in the Bible. Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. It was her favorite." He nodded slowly. "You scanned all this?" "Yes. Originals are in a safe place now. I've got timestamps on every photo, and here's the envelope too, dated and sealed with her handwriting on the front." He blinked. Then his voice shifted from skeptical to serious. "We need to file an affidavit of interest. Today. That deed, the handwritten one, needs to be recorded, even if it wasn't formally notarized. Her words, the context, and that journal build a case. At minimum, it'll stop him from transferring the property. At best, we reverse everything." Something inside me tightened. Not fear, not pride. Just a kind of steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. "Tell me what to do." An hour later, I was in my car with a printed copy of every document in a manila folder, heading to the local county clerk's office. The sky was fully awake now, but the street still felt like it was holding its breath. The clerk behind the window wore tortoise-shell glasses and spoke in a voice that told me she'd seen too many angry people in her career. "You're here to file a what?" she asked, scanning the paperwork. "Affidavit of interest and quiet title," I replied, laying everything in order. "Here's the original deed, photos of the journal entries, and a notarized letter from my attorney." She flipped through the pages slowly, eyes pausing at Delilah's signature. "You're saying this overrides the recorded deed?" I didn't blink. "I'm saying the recorded deed is a forgery, and this was her intent." She looked up at me, just for a second, and something softened in her expression. Maybe she'd had her own Wendell once. "Well, Mr. Marsh, filing this means we'll notify the other party. It's going to cause a stir. I'm counting on it." She stamped the top page. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Good luck, she said simply, then handed me my receipt. By the time I stepped out into the sunlight, I felt like something in the air had shifted, like maybe, for the first time, Wendell wasn't holding all the cards. I stopped by the diner near the square and ordered a sandwich to go. While I waited, I checked my phone. One new voicemail, Wendell. I listened with the phone pressed to my ear, just outside the glass window. Rowan, it's Wendell. Listen, I think you're confused about some things. I heard you may have filed something. We need to talk. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. Don't embarrass the family. His tone was polished, even, but not quite steady. He was trying to sound like the man who used to pass out wine at family dinners and talk about legacies. But there was something under it, thin cracks in the varnish. I didn't call him back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Tyrell. An hour later, Tyrell called. No small talk. We've got enough. I filed a motion for temporary injunction. If the judge agrees, Wendell won't be able to sell, rent, or refinance anything tied to Delilah's estate. That house, that land, it's all frozen now. I sat at the kitchen table, the light catching the rim of my coffee mug, which I hadn't touched since morning. He's going to panic, I said. That's fine, Tyrell replied. It's about time someone made him. I stared at the framed photo above the stove, me and Delilah, the one time she came to my art show in college. She stood a little behind me, hand on my shoulder. I hadn't realized until now that it was her way of passing the torch. I ran a hand through my hair and exhaled long and slow. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. That feeling lasted until I stepped outside. It was subtle at first. The way Mrs. Portman, who usually walked her dachshund at 8:15 sharp, paused when she saw me. She adjusted her sunglasses like she hadn't noticed me at all, tugged her dog's leash tighter, and crossed the street. No wave, not even a nod. I stood on my porch with my coffee growing cold in my hand, watching her disappear down the sidewalk. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she had somewhere to be. But then came Leo. I walked down to the corner grocery, just like I had for years, expecting our usual banter. Leo always cracked a joke about my hair or my slow coffee addiction, but this time, he barely looked up from the register. Morning, I offered, keeping it light. He scanned the oatmeal box like it had done something to offend him. You really think she'd cut her own son out like that? He said flatly. I froze. I'm sorry? Leo finally looked at me, just long enough to let me see the line had been crossed. Delilah loved Wendell. Everyone knew that. The next customer stepped up behind me. I paid without another word. The walk back home felt longer than usual. The morning sun seemed harsher somehow, the breeze meaner. I kept telling myself not to overthink it, but the weight in my chest said otherwise. By lunchtime, it wasn't just a feeling. I opened my phone and went straight to the neighborhood Facebook group, usually filled with lost cat posts and bake sale announcements. But there it was. A post without a name, just a black and white photo of Delilah's house from years ago and a message typed in bold. Beware of greedy relatives trying to profit off grieving families. Some people will do anything for a piece of property they didn't earn. I didn't have to scroll far. Someone tagged me in a comment. Isn't this about Rowan? Heard she's trying to sue her own family. Another added, that house meant everything to Delilah. If she left it to her son, that's her business. This is just sad. I read every word, not because I believed any of it, but because I needed to know how deep Wendell's claws had sunk. By the afternoon, someone had dumped a bag of fast food wrappers on my porch. I'd never seen a Chick-fil-A within 2 miles, but somehow their trash found me. I swept it up in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I did check every window before I went to bed that night. The next morning wasn't much better. A single envelope sat inside my mailbox. No return address, but I knew that heavy beige stock the second I touched it. Legal firm. Wendell's. I slid it open at the kitchen table. Cease and desist. Accusations of forgery, of manipulating a vulnerable elder, of mental decline and hallucinations of fear in Delilah's final year. Wendell had hired a lawyer who'd clearly never met her, but knew exactly what to say to poison a courtroom. Confused, paranoid, unfit. I couldn't breathe. Not because it was true, but because it was such a familiar script. When a woman over 80 speaks clearly and says something others don't like, they don't call it bravery. They call it dementia. I held the letter tighter until the edge bent in my hand. Delilah wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. I went upstairs, opened the drawer beside my bed, and pulled out her journal again. The one I'd read front to back more times than I could count. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, until I turned to the last pages. There, scribbled beneath an entry about Wendell bringing her the wrong medications again, was a short note in darker ink. If anything ever happens, they'll try to erase you. Don't let them. And just like that, I remembered. It had been one of those rare afternoons when her pain had let up enough for us to sit outside. We'd made lemonade her way, extra pulp, less sugar, and she'd sipped hers slowly, watching the wind move through the trees. She'd leaned in, her voice soft but steady. "Rowan," she said, "they think because I'm old, I'm easy to outmaneuver, but I've got more years of watching people's games than they've got playing them." I laughed, thinking it was just one of her lines, but then she put her hand on mine, squeezing just enough to make me look her in the eyes. "If they ever tell you I wasn't in my right mind, don't you believe it? I know exactly what I'm doing, and I did it for you." I remember the way her pupils held steady, the clarity in her gaze, the steel in her bones. She'd outlived a war, 2 recessions, and a husband who gambled away half their savings, but what she feared most was being rewritten. Now Wendell was doing just that. I picked up the phone and called Tyrell Franklin. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Rowan?" "They're claiming she was delusional," I said. My voice was steady now, ice cold. There was a pause on his end. Then, "We'll need someone who saw her recently. Someone credible." "The hospice nurse," I said immediately. "Yes," Tyrell agreed. "If we can show she was lucid near the end, Wendell's claim falls apart." There was silence between us for a beat. "Then let's collapse it," I said, and hit dial. Tyrell's voice echoed in my ear for a second after the call ended, as if the weight of what we'd just decided needed an extra beat to settle. I stared at my phone. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside, into a world that suddenly felt like it might tilt back in my favor. We didn't waste time. Within an hour, Tyrell had arranged a video call with the hospice nurse who'd cared for Delilah near the end. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me feared disappointment. Maybe the nurse had only vague memories, or worse, had bought into Wendell's lies. But then Naomi Clement appeared on screen. Her hair was in tight gray curls, her face lined but bright. She looked into the camera and smiled warmly. "I remember your grandmother very well," she said gently. "Delilah. She was a firecracker, sharp as a tack, knew exactly what she wanted." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Tyrell leaned forward slightly. "Naomi, do you recall anything she said about her grandson, about anything she wanted to leave behind?" Naomi's face softened. "Actually, yes. There was one night. This was about 3 weeks before she passed. She called me into her room around 2 a.m. She said, 'Nurse Clement, if anything happens and my son starts sniffing around, please make sure my grandson gets the blue envelope. He'll know what to do.'" I blinked. "Blue envelope?" She was very specific, said it was important. I wrote it down in my log because, well, I don't usually get requests like that. But after she passed, her son was the one who cleared the room. I asked him if he needed help sorting her things. He said, "Don't worry, it's already handled." I looked at Tyrell. His lips were pressed tight. He was already thinking ahead. Did Delilah seem confused at any point during your care? He asked. Naomi shook her head slowly. No. She was scared, yes, but lucid, especially about her son. She didn't trust him, and she worried she'd be erased after she was gone. A silence fell between us. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. After the call, I just sat there for a moment. The blue envelope, I'd never seen it. And if Wendell had cleared her room, maybe that was the point. Tyrell looked at me. We need to find that envelope. I nodded, stood up, and grabbed my keys. I know exactly where to start. The estate was cold and stale when I stepped inside. No power had been run since Wendell's little stunt with the snowstorm. The house smelled of dust and time. I moved room by room, checking drawers, closets, cabinets. Nothing. I ended up in the basement, which I hadn't touched in years. Stacks of boxes leaned against damp walls, old Christmas decorations, yellowed school photos of Wendell, boxes labeled kitchen and books and misc. I tore through them, tossing aside broken vases and outdated cookbooks. Then I saw it, on a top shelf behind an old walker. A ceramic angel Delilah used to keep on her mantel, now packed away like garbage. I pulled it down. It felt heavier than I remembered. I turned it over. The base was sealed with a thin strip of cracked masking tape. My heart pounded. I peeled the tape back and gently lifted the ceramic bottom. Nestled inside, folded neatly, was a blue envelope. My hands trembled as I slid it out. Rowan was written in Delilah's slanted script. I sat on the basement floor, legs crossed like a child, and opened it. The paper was soft, worn from time, but every word clear. My dearest Rowan, if you're reading this, then they've done exactly what I feared. I never wanted it to come to this. But your uncle, my son, he hasn't been the same man for a long time. I don't know when he changed. Maybe after your mother died? Maybe after I refused to pay for another one of his schemes. But he's angry. And he blames you because you remind him of the life he never had the courage to build. This house is yours. I've filed the deed transfer and kept a copy hidden. I've watched you care for this home, care for me, with patience and love. I only wish I had more time to tell you how proud I am. Don't let guilt silence you. You were never the burden. You were the light. Delilah. I don't know how long I sat there. The paper shook in my hands as everything she'd never said out loud finally spoke through her handwriting. It wasn't just validation, it was love. The kind Wendell could never counterfeit, no matter how many lies he spun. When I walked back upstairs, letter in hand, Tyrell was already preparing the motion to attach Naomi's testimony and Delilah's letter to the claim. The weight of momentum had finally shifted. This changes everything, he said. The court can't ignore this. And then, a knock. Not the hesitant kind, the kind that came with authority. I opened the door to a courier in a gray windbreaker holding a clipboard and a manila envelope. Are you Rowan Marin? I nodded. Legal delivery. Sign here. I scrawled my name and opened the envelope as the courier disappeared down the walkway. Inside, formal papers, thick, official. A notice of eviction, filed by Wendell's attorney. Tyrell took the papers, eyes narrowing as he scanned them. He's trying to claim the current occupant, meaning you, is unlawfully interfering with estate administration. I laughed, but it was hollow. So let me get this straight. He pushed his own mother into the cold, lied to the entire neighborhood, and now he wants to throw me out of the house she left me. Tyrell looked at me. It's desperate. He's losing, and he knows it. I folded the eviction notice in half and set it on the table beside Delilah's letter. He took my grandmother's dignity. Now he wants the roof she left me. He's not getting either. The courthouse steps were slick with morning frost, and I could feel it seep through the soles of my shoes. 2 weeks had passed since Wendell had sent that eviction notice. I hadn't responded with words. I'd responded by handing Tyrell the envelope and the recording. Now, as we stood in front of the county courthouse, my chest felt like a drum. Tyrell adjusted his overcoat and glanced at me. "You ready?" I nodded. More than I've ever been. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. Neighbors, legal interns, 2 local reporters. Wendell was already seated at the plaintiff's table, his tie tight, hair sculpted, flanked by 2 attorneys in gray suits. He looked every bit the polished son he always pretended to be. Judge Martha Dorsey took her seat, glasses perched low on her nose, the kind of woman who didn't tolerate nonsense and had seen too many lies dressed in tailored jackets. She tapped her gavel. "Let's begin." Wendell's attorney started with a smooth, theatrical tone. "Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Rowan manipulated a grieving, elderly woman to alter her estate in his favor. The decedent was not of sound mind. My client, her son, seeks rightful restitution." Tyrell stood, calm and grounded. "We will present evidence proving not only Delilah's mental clarity, but her intent, spoken and written. We also have a witness with first-hand knowledge." Judge Dorsey nodded. "Proceed." Tyrell signaled, and a monitor lit up with Naomi Clement's face. The hospice nurse looked tired but warm, like someone who'd sat by too many bedsides to be intimidated by a courtroom. "Ms. Clement," Tyrell began, "you cared for Delilah during her final weeks?" "I did," she said firmly. "And I remember her clearly. She wasn't confused. She was worried. She told me to make sure her grandson got the blue envelope if anything happened to her." "Did she mention her son, Wendell?" Naomi's jaw tightened. "She said he'd already taken too much from her. She said she didn't want him taking her voice after she was gone." The courtroom was still. Tyrell looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to play a recording made by Ms. Clement, with Delilah's verbal permission." There was a pause. Wendell's lawyer shot up. "Objection, this could be manipulated audio." "Overruled," Judge Dorsey said. "Play it." Tyrell pressed play. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but her voice, unmistakable and strong, filled the room. "This is Delilah Jean Carter. I'm giving my house to Rowan. I trust him. Wendell doesn't care who I am, just what I leave behind. If anyone questions this, let them know. I was never confused. I just stopped being quiet." A murmur swept the room. I couldn't move. Wendell went rigid. "That's fake." "You people are sick!" Judge Dorsey raised a hand. "Mr. Carter, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." Tyrell approached the bench and placed the letter from the ceramic angel in the evidence tray. This was written 6 months before Delilah's passing. Handwritten, signed, and notarized. The judge read silently for a few seconds. Then she looked up, eyes hard as marble. "The court finds no grounds for Mr. Carter's claims. All property remains with Mr. Rowan Carter. This ruling is final and binding. Mr. Carter is warned against future attempts to interfere with the estate. Court adjourned." The gavel dropped. I didn't breathe. Wendell stormed out, his coat dragging behind him, steps clumsy, eyes glazed. For the first time, I didn't feel anger watching him. I felt distance, like watching a man on a sinking boat I didn't owe a rope to. Outside, the sun was low in the sky. Tyrell gave me a small smile. "You did it." "No," I said, looking up at the soft clouds above. "She did. We didn't go out to celebrate. I just wanted to go home." The house stood quiet when I pulled up the drive. The snow from last night still blanketed the front lawn, untouched. I walked in and locked the door behind me. The living room still smelled like wood polish and faint lavender. I stepped into the kitchen, the spot where she used to hum while toasting cinnamon bread. I opened the cabinets. There was still her old tin of tea in the corner, nearly empty. I filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and pulled her picture from the living room shelf. It was her smile from 20 years ago, holding me at some county fair, a blue ribbon in her hand. I placed it by the window. "You're home, Delilah," I whispered. It's yours again. I stayed like that for a while, just watching the snow settle outside the kitchen window. The war was over. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the back porch, wrapping myself in her old quilt. The wind had picked up, swirling flakes across the field. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, and a child's laughter carried faintly across the cold air. I looked out past the trees, toward the road she used to walk every morning before her knees gave out. I imagined her there, strong and laughing, waving at the mailman, scolding squirrels. She'd loved this place, not for what it was worth, but for what it held. People talk a lot about legacy. They think it's about money or land or names etched into deeds. But legacy is quieter than that. I didn't want a house. I wanted her back. But since I can't, I'll keep what mattered most to her safe. I'll protect it, not because it's mine, but because it was hers. Dignity isn't inherited, it's chosen. And I chose hers.